resume my recording. So again, just download this color correction stabilization footage. It's the same thing as that Premiere files. Shouldn't take long, but that's for the second half of class. So we can just let that keep going. So I'm going to stop my share because shenanigans are about to ensue. What?
Dude, I love shenanigans.
Stay up here. Stay there. Okay. So today, we're going to talk about some video, color correction, and other such cool things that you can do with cameras. So I have this beautiful little Canon right here. We have a whole bunch of these. This is a T5i downstairs for you guys to check out for freezies. You just sell your firstborn, sign some papers, that sort of thing. We also have T3is. They're the exact same, but they're not touch screen, and they're missing like 1 or 2 buttons. But I'm going to show you how to set these up, how they work. They're a camera. They're pretty self-explanatory. So you see down here, right here, this is your battery. I just charged it. Anytime you get a camera from here, there's a couple things you want to do automatically. You want to show no remorse with these cameras to a point. You want to take care of them. They are your children. If you break them, you buy them. I would hate for you to have to buy us a new camera. That would suck. It's happened before. Don't let it be you. One thing is we will set this to default. I will not, well, I could probably do it. I'm not doing it the way I did at home. Shouldn't break anything, we hope. But you always want to make sure it's charged before you do anything. You can be a nice human and charge it before you bring it back if you've checked it out from here. Or you don't have to. If you're going to check something out here, always give yourself some time before you go out and film stuff, because, you know, battery might not be alive. When I got this one, it was flashing red and dying. So I had to charge it early this morning while I was trying to figure out all this stuff. Now, if you want to look at the notes that I have here, it's the exact same notes that are on D2L right now. You can go on there. There's like the camera notes and camera settings or something like that. Camera setup and camera setup notes, something like that. There's 2 of them. They're the exact notes I'm going to use right now to walk you through how to set up this camera. And there's 2 different types. So let's dive on in here. Anytime you are using these cameras, remember, charge your battery. If you're going to be filming, even if you're going to be using your phone for the homework, go outside. The light inside this building is absolutely terrible. Go outside. You won't have to worry about weirdness. Your footage won't be grainy. It won't look like poop. Go outside. There are things you do still have to worry about going outside, like bears. Watch out for bears. True story. People in one of these classes went outside. They were on a hiking trail, saw some bears, got some good footage, and then ran. Watch out for bears. So the first thing we want to do with this camera is I'm going to hit the menu button. So you won't be able to see it, but there's this tiny little button at the top left of the camera. I don't think I can hold it up and you guys see it right here. This little button right here. That is your menu. You're going to want to click that. This is not the notes I want. This is the notes I want. And the first thing you're going to do is, if you notice here, I'm on this manual setting. You can do this for pretty much any of them, but the manual movie. So you've got on, this is your standard. If I click up to movie, it's going to do some stuff. It's going to think. I'm going to get a different image here. And when I click on the menu button again, I'm going to have all different buttons, extra stuff. So you want to make sure you're on manual and movie. So now, first things first, we want to format this card. Remember, I said no mercy. So we're going to go over here to this first little wrench, and I'm going to come down here to format card. I personally know that this camera is empty. But that being said, if someone has checked out this camera before me and they haven't gotten their footage off, it is too late. It is yours now. So I'm going to hit OK, no remorse. I'm going to format that card. I'm then going to come over here to the fourth wrench, and I'm going to clear all the settings and take it back to default. And it's going to be like, do you want to just do functions or settings? Everything. No remorse. Cancel it, clear it. You don't know who else has been touching this camera. You don't know what they've changed. They could have messed it up big time. We're going to clear all that. I'm going to hit cancel. Then I'm going to go to the second wrench, and you can do all these a little out of order. I like doing those two first. That way, if something goes wrong, I can just reformat it again. First thing we want to do is turn off this auto power off. If you're going to record something and it's longer than 30 seconds, this camera's just going to turn off regardless. That's silly. So I'm just going to disable that. If you're worried about battery usage and you're out in the wilderness and you're like, oh no, I'm worried that my camera's going to die and I only have the one battery, you can set this to 2, 4, 8, 15, whatever you want. I highly recommend just disabling it. If you check out a camera from here, we do have extra batteries. So if you're like, I'm going to go out in the middle of nowhere, I need to, film some stuff on the trail, you can definitely check out more than one battery, have it all the way nice and filled up, and take that off. Other things we want to change is you can change this LCD brightness. For me, I think I'm actually going to turn it down a little bit. There you go. It's a little easier for you guys to see. I'm also going to turn this LCD auto off. It's the same thing, except instead of your entire camera turning off, it's just the screen. Why on earth would anyone want to not see what's going on their screen? So I'm going to turn this off as well. You can also set your time zone, date, time. If you need to change the language for whatever reason, you can do that. And this video system NTSC is actually how it's going to be viewed on a TV or camera. You want to leave this NTSC for us in the US if you were somewhere else. The other option is PAL. That works pretty good for other types of, I just hit y'all, I'm sorry. For different types of screens. Okay, so now that we have our screen not going to turn off, there's a couple of other things we need to do. Let's go over here to one of these movie things right here. We'll go to this first one. This AF method is pretty much, is it tracking your face? So auto facial tracking. We want to tell that to single. We want it to not track anything. We want it to track the whole camera, especially if we're doing video footage. If we have it to multi or facial tracking, pretty much it's going to be like, oh, I want to see your face in focus. No, your face. No, the other face. We want to have it nice and single. The movie servo is just a really weird little thing. Disabling that pretty much says, hey, do you want to use the external microphone to reduce noise? We want to disable that. We want to be able to have our microphone pick up everything. For this class, when you're recording, if you're using one of these cameras, if it's making weird noises or the wind noise is really hard and heavy and loud, that's okay. I still want to be able to hear like that wind blowing and stuff like that. And you're not going to be using audio equipment, so having that movie servo off will work quite well. We also want to take a look at this grid display. So currently it is set to off. If you want to make sure your rule of thirds is working quite well, you can set it to this grid 1. So if I click that, exit out of my menu. Don't know if it's going to work. There we go. If I point it at you guys, you can see I've got that grid there. That's a really good way to see your rule of thirds. You can also do this other one that's in here that's like multiple grid. It's like a grid of 16 or something crazy like that. It's a little too busy for my liking, but if you're trying to get something lined up just right, it does come in handy. In this second movie one, this is our speed and frame rate and size of our image for our video. For us, this 1920, 24 frames a second, the second one here, is the one that's going to work best for us. If you're going to be doing something that's capturing faster motion, such as someone playing a sport, kids running, dogs, that sort of thing, the 30 or even the 60 frames per second at a smaller frame size will work really well, because then you can always explode it out a little bit. You'll get a little bit of blur and pixelization, but you'll be able to capture that motion quite well. If you're going to be doing something with sound, you will have to change the sound recording. You can see my decibels here are quite loud. If I yell a little bit more, they go up a little further. But you want to just make sure that this is in the size that you want if you're doing that. Let's see here. In this one right here, this is just all of your images. So if you're going to be taking a picture, what quality do you want? Do you want it to beep? Do you want the shutter sound? That sort of thing. This second one is your exposure. Should you come in here and be like, for some reason, my exposure is just a little too high or a little too low, you can click that and take it up or down as needed. I'm not going to worry about that in here. You can also change your light balance and optimization. Should you need these, they are here. I highly recommend leaving this on disable. You want to have full control over your light. But if you do find that your white balance is doing something odd, you can come down here and set a custom one and shift stuff. Now, other things you want to make sure you're looking at. This picture style is currently set to auto. What this is how is it recording your footage color correction wise. For everything in this class and footage wise into the future, you want to make sure it's this neutral right here. So it'll say neutral here. Pretty much that's shooting in flat. Or you can come down here and use this user-defined 3, which is also called Cine style. All of the cameras should have it, but if they don't, you can use this neutral right here. This second kind of play button here, for this histogram right here, we want to make sure it is set to brightness. You can also do color if you're worried if you have too much of one color or not in your shot. Pretty much what this says is, hey, we want to be able to see how dark or how bright certain things are in our image. And I'll show you that in a moment. So if I come over here, go to the recording. If I come over here, click this little info button right next to menu, it's right there. If I push it a couple times, you'll get to this screen. So these are all of your color correction, your ISOs, that sort of thing are all here, but this is your histogram. So you can see I have a lot of darkness here and a lot of bright. So if I turn my lens off, so if I take my lens cap off, you'll see certain things are super bright and white. So like right here, super bright. And then I have a lot of different other values through here. So I turn it in the opposite direction. I'm going to set this right here, and you guys are just going to look between the computers. And you can see we've got this super brightness and super darkness right here. So it's super dark down there. All right. Now, if you're shooting at 24 frames a second, your shutter speed should be close to 50. That shutter speed is right here. Currently mine's at 125. So I'm getting a lot of grain all in my footage. I don't think that's coming through very well, but that's also because the ISO is super low. So I can spin this little tiny gear right here, right behind the little take picture button. And that will take it either up or down. So I'm going to take that down. I'm going in the wrong direction. To 50. So now we're getting a lot less darkness. We're getting a little bit more light through here. This is looking a little bit more natural, that sort of thing. We also want to take a look at the aperture. There's this little button right here called AV. There's also a quality button right here, but this AV is your aperture settings. If you click that, you'll see it comes to this right here. I can now scroll that scrolly wheel here. Oops, wrong button. Wrong button. There we go. I can scroll this scrolly wheel here. The lower the number, the more your aperture will be. So the more light will be let into your camera. The higher this number, the lower your aperture, the less light comes in. Another good indication to remember is the more light you have, the more likely your footage may or may not have more grain. You can't see it at all, but it's sparkly. But just keep in mind, there is a good balance there between your AF, your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO. So let's take a look at the ISO. So like I said, the camera that I'm using is touchscreen, so I could just click right here on the screen, or there is a little button called ISO at the top above that big spinny wheel that I showed you. And saw that. And there is different settings for the ISO. So 100, so this was auto. Auto will just do its thing. It'll try to automatically change based off what you're looking at. This can sometimes be a good starting point. If for some reason your ISO, your aperture, your frame rate all isn't working together, you can sometimes change this back to auto, and it'll help you get to a proper location on here. So 100 is super dark, 200 is a little less, 400 is a little less, 800 is even less, 16, 32, and 64. The higher this number, the more light is going in to your camera. So for instance, hello, Mr. Train. So for instance, if I were to come over here, currently the lights in this room are off. If I turn them on, we have a nice brighter ISO. So if I change this down to 800, this is actually pretty nice. For most stuff inside, 800 to 1600 is going to be about what you want. Give or take, you might need more or less light depending on a shot. More light is always better. You can always make it darker in post. Now, other things to be aware of. If I hit this little Q button or the quality, I can also click any of these buttons over here, specifically this AWB. This is auto white balance. This is that button to say, hey, I want to make sure, hold on. This one right here. This is to make sure that the white balance of your camera is working correctly. So currently it's on auto. For daylight, you'll see everything got a little bit more orangey. For shade, it got even more so. Cloudy, didn't really change too much. But if I change it to tungsten, everything gets a little bit more blue. No matter what you're doing, you want to make sure your white balance is giving you the best color correction you can. So I'm currently in fluorescent lighting, so I would want to make sure I'm using fluorescent. That way I don't have too much blue like this one, or too much orange like this one. So I'm going to do this white fluorescent for me. Do you want flash, or do you want to make something a little bit more custom? Okay. Other really important things that I'm going to show you. When you are working with a camera that looks like this, regardless of if it's Nikon, Canon, Fujifilm, whatever, if it has, this is why we have the straps, never take the straps off. Forewarning, even if it's your own, I highly recommend leave straps on. If it has this little two sections here, there is a manual focus and an auto focus. No matter what you're doing, this manual focus will give you the best footage overall. What you can do is you can say, hey, I want to look at, let's say, Megan's face here, just because she's the closest thing right here. If I wanted to see her actually in focus, currently she's just a blur, I can click this tiny little buttons up here. These are your zoom ins to check your zoom. So they're going to zoom in temporarily, get us nice and close to her face, and we can now zoom in or out as needed, and then change our focus so that she actually gets into focus. So now she is in focus. I can click this button again. It'll take us back out. And now my other monitor is in focus. So if you're noticing that your camera isn't quite getting crisp enough, use those little buttons, zoom in, make sure everything's working great. Other thing you want to do, over here, there is another little section. So there's auto manual focus right here. Underneath it, there is stabilizer, off or on. If you are using a tripod, like what you are currently sitting on, you want that to be off. What Stabilizer does is it says, hey, here's my camera. I'm going to make sure that your hands aren't shaking. So I'm going to account for that, and I'm going to shake the camera in opposite of whatever you're doing. If you are on a tripod like you guys currently are, your footage will do this the whole time. You don't want that. That's hard to remove. However, if you are holding it handheld, like I am, you want to turn that on so that it won't be as shaky. So you can see it's a little less shaky. It kind of accounts for my hand motions, that sort of thing. So tripod, you want it off. Handheld, you want it on. I will reiterate, leave the strap on the camera. As you saw, had I not had that strap, this camera would have crashed and I would have had to pay for it. That would not have been good. I am broke just as much as you are. Other things to just keep in mind with the camera. So let me unplug this. Where is my mouse? Switch back over to the other view. Other things to kind of keep in mind with this big boy right here. If you are filming with something like this, I highly recommend keeping it around your neck for a couple of reasons. One, if you accidentally drop it, it's not on the ground now. It's it hit me, I'm squishy. You're squishier than the floor. It's better for it to hit you than the ground. But also, if you're going to be taking footage and walking, if you take it and lightly push your hands against it, you'll create sort of a tension rig, which will allow you to film a little bit smoother and not have to buy one of those fancy gibbles. Other settings to remember. Camera-wise, it's pretty much all we want to look at. But really keep in mind when we're filming stuff that you want to keep your lighting nice. Go outside. You won't have to actually manually buy lighting. You won't have to find lighting. But if you do want to use some lighting and film indoors, we do have lighting kits downstairs for you guys to check out as well. We also have tripods, all sorts of cords, audio equipment, and whatever fun stuff you think you might need. But go outside. Watch for bears. All right, so I'm going to pause my recording. I'm going to re-plug in this other HDMI, and then we'll get a look at the other side of what we're going to be doing. And let's open up Premiere. Now, all of the things that we're going to go over today, you can also do in After Effects. The buttons are just in slightly different places. They're named the same things, all that stuff. They're the exact same thing. So if you want to do it in After Effects and not Premiere, you can definitely do this whole lecture also in After Effects. The buttons are just, slightly different. So I'm just making a new Premiere project real quick. You can name it whatever you like. I named mine Color Correction and Stable. Spelled wrong, short for Stabilization, because that's what we're going to be doing.
Can you do the screen share?
Yes, I am working on that right here. Boom, perfect. So you can see Color Correction and Stable, like so. Get rid of that. Put this up here. I need these. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure which photo or which videos I gave you, but I'm gonna make sure I'm in editing first. You should have something that's maybe like cowboy, something that's maybe like this girl getting painted, possibly some flowers, whatever you, something like that. So when we're thinking about color correction inside of Premiere or just in film in general, when we're looking at our footage, how we shoot it, changes how the footage is. So I'm going to import 3 different files. I'm importing that cowboy and 2 others. I have a cowboy bright and dark, which I don't think I gave you. That's okay. When we're doing color correction in here, how we have them set up to look changes the feel of our footage. So this is the cowboy. This is just the standard, not color corrected, maybe lightly color corrected to get his skin and stuff back into, you know, how it should look. But this is just more or less raw footage, not really edited. What sort of film do you think this would be from? Like a Western. What other sort, like what kind of feelings does it evoke in you? Anything? Nothing like a little sad.
He is absolutely forcing that smile. That is the most forced smile I've ever seen.
Yes. So as of how we kind of see it now, like it's not really evoking too much. Like we know it's from a movie, like something's happening, that sort of thing. But if we were to make it brighter, so let me take the same clip, just with some bright color correction. How does just changing that color correction change this clip?
Looks a bit brighter.
Looks a little bit more lighthearted. You know,
Yeah.
he's definitely still forcing that smile, but
It's less of a, my friend just died and now I have to act like I'm okay, and more of a, I literally just dropped my soup on the ground, you guys.
yeah, it's a lot more lighthearted, a lot more friendly. Now let's take that same clip, but dark. Start it a little closer to that creepy smile. He just killed somebody, right? Like
That man has murdered people.
It's a murder. It definitely gives off a darker, more sinister feel. So how we change the color, the brightness, all that sort of thing with our clips will drastically change the tone. So if you're going for something more lighthearted, it's going to be lighter, it's going to be more colorful, as compared to if you're trying to write something a little bit more sinister, maybe something more creepy, which will be darker, less contrast, that sort of thing. So I'm going to remove all those from my Premiere, and let's take a look at, I'm going to just drag in the color correction one I have, which is this lady. You can feel free to use any of the clips that I've provided you for this one, except for the one labeled Stabilization or Stabilized Demo. So I'm going to pull her in. So she has been shot in flat. So her colors are nice and muted. We can guess that maybe she's like in this kind of greenish room, but we don't really know too terribly much. She's definitely getting painted for some sort of monster movie. But if we were given this footage and we're making a documentary about something, we would need to color correct this to get it back to its standard video. Because if we were to show this would not be that great, right? So let's take a look at some of the things we can do in here to fix the color of this video. So I'm going to come over here to Effects. If you're using After Effects to do this, it's the same thing. You'll just go to Effects and Presets over here, and everything's titled the same. It's just going to be over here instead of right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is when we're playing in Photoshop, all of those same color correction techniques we use, levels, color balance, curves, brightness, contrast, all that are all inside of here. We just have to look for it. So I'm going to type in levels, and you'll see I get a levels and an obsolete levels. Anything that's in the obsolete is pretty much like Premiere and Adobe being like, we don't like this anymore. Some of it works great and still works great. Others of it, they're like, no, you don't want this. We do not want this auto levels. We want standard levels. So there's a couple ways we can do this. We can either drag this directly onto our clip, come over to effects controls, click on here, and you'll see we get levels. Or we can come over and in here, right click, make a new item and make a new adjustment layer. What the adjustment layer does is says, hey, I'm an invisible layer that you can make as long or as short as you like to have different types of color correction on it instead of your original footage. Pretty much, this is really nice because if you're like 10 steps down the road and you're like, I really don't like my color correction, I kind of want to start from scratch, but I don't want to get rid of everything, you can just hide that layer. So I'm going to put my levels on this adjustment layer right here. So this works exactly like it looks. There's a whole bunch of things right here. If you click on the little arrows, there's a bunch of sliders. They all do pretty much what they say. It's the level of the black, white, black input, white input, or output based on RGB, the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel. It's a lot of switches in here. So if we wanted to take this here, make it darker, we could increase by clicking on the blue, increase the darkness, increase the brightness. If we needed to change the gamma, we can make it darker or brighter. I'm going to make it a little brighter. We can also come into individual channels and be like, I want the green black channel to be darker. So you can see everywhere that looks a little green gets darker, a little bit more red. Same with the white, everything that's green gets brighter or less so. But overall, this levels works pretty well for pretty standard black and white channels. It's not the best, but it's pretty nice. So I'm going to minimize this here, and I'm just going to turn this off visibly by clicking this little FX toggle. If you're using After Effects, this FX toggle is in this little area that's down here where all of your layers are. There's like a little FX section, you just toggle that off right there. But I'm going to turn it off here. And then I'm going to come back over here to this right here, and I'm going to type in brightness. And you'll see we get a brightness and contrast, just like we had inside of Photoshop. I'm going to drag that over here, and you'll see I can make things brighter or darker. I can make it more contrasty or less contrasty. I find a nice, good middle ground here. I make it a little brighter, a little bit more contrast. And again, once I get this kind of where I like it, I'm going to minimize it and just turn this off so we can see before and after. If we turn on our levels, you'll see it gets even more different. From here, I'm going to type in color balance. Now this is the only one that's a bit different, where color balance is your hue, lightness, and saturation. So you can see I have a standard color balance, a color balance HLS, a color balance RGB, RGB color correcting, color emboss, etc. All of these are different color changers inside of Premiere, but the one we want to use and the one that's going to work best for us is this color balance HLS. So I'm going to drag this on here. HLS stands exactly like what you think it does, hue, lightness, saturation. So I can say, hey, I want to make a kaleidoscope of colors in here. You can say, I want it to be lighter or darker. And you can say, I want there to be more color saturation. So you can see everything is very green. So you might have to lightly shift something in here or in a different color correction section. So I'm going to turn my brightness and contrast on. You can see it makes it a little nicer. If I turn my levels back on, it makes it even better. And I might even have to go back into my levels and take a look at that black and white point in my green. But there's other ways we can take some of this green out of here. And that's by using the curves, like what we had inside of Photoshop. So you can see we have Rgb Curves. I'm going to drag that onto my adjustment layer. And you can see we get these different curve graphs for each one that we want to use. So we have our white balance, the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel. So depending on which channel we move will change how our color inside of our footage works. So if I'm like, there's a lot of green in here, let's take some of that out. I can click on this graph somewhere in the middle and take out some of that color. So I start to get a little bit more of her skin tone back. It's a little less green. It's a little less green in the background. Maybe I need to take some blue out or put some more blue in. So I'm going to lightly bow that out. And you can see her skin tone really starts to show back up. Background looks a little bit more normalized. The trash bag she's wearing to keep herself from getting paint all over is looking more like a trash bag and has a little bit more of that duct tape color. If we needed to, we could also be like, hey, let's take some of this red and put more red or take more red out. Or we could say, hey, let's take some more of this color and kind of push it in different directions. Now you can also add multiple points to these, just like you can inside Photoshop. So if I know I need my whites to be a little duller, my darks to be a little darker or a little lighter, we can change these here. I'm just going to undo those a little bit. So that's pretty nice. So we've got this back to about where it should normally be, right? It's taken us going from our levels, so our original clip, to our levels, to our brightness, to our color balance, and then finally to those curves, but we did get it back to where we like it. Now, not all of your clips will need all of these. Maybe it just needs the levels or just the color. Depending on the clip you're using, it might need all of these, or it might need even more. There is another button that we can play with. So I'm going to turn all of these off. Or instead of turning all of these off, I can turn off this layer, since I have this on an adjustment layer. And I'm going to make another adjustment layer and put it on top, because even though it's the same name of this adjustment layer, it doesn't have anything in it, so it's empty. And what we're going to put here is a different color correction effect called Lumetri Color. L-U-M-E-T-R-I color. Now, if you noticed before I typed in color, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that pops up. These are all filters. We'll get to that in a moment. So I'm just going to type in color, and I'm going to click and drag this Lumetri Color into our adjustment layer. Now, there's two ways to view the Lumetri Color system. There's the standard way, like this, that we were using similar to this other adjustment layer to change the levels, the brightness, color correction, and all that. So we can do that all here, or we can click on the color section, and Lumetri Color is already built in right here. So this is the overall standard color correction tool that I highly recommend you use for everything. It's got everything built all into one big tool. So we're going to take a look at different buttons that it has that you might also need to know about. So let's say our footage is really orange. Maybe when you're filming, you forgot to change it to tungsten and you were filming in tungsten light and you get it to your computer and you're like, oh my goodness, it is the orangest footage I've ever seen. You can fix that with this temperature selector right here, just by taking it down into the blue. The blue will counteract the orange color. That also being said, if you have footage that's very blue, like this footage is a little blue, you can take that a little further into the orange and slowly add a little bit more of that orangish color back to it so that we get a little bit more of that natural color correction. Now, if your footage is a little bit more green or a little bit more magenta, you can also change that as well. Now, if your overall color correction and temperature are weird and you're like, I'm not sure how far I should push this, You can also come over here and use this white balance selector and click this little eyedropper. And then you want to find the brightest part on, I'm going to zoom in, your footage. Come on. Let me zoom. Fine, don't let me zoom. And you just want to click where that is. And you'll see my numbers automatically change so that it can automatically decide what it thinks is the best white balance for my image and video. So if you're like, this is really orange, it's not really seeming to do anything, you can use this auto white balance selector and it'll try to correct it for you. And then you can either exaggerate it a little bit more or a little bit less. We can also come down here. So this is all just in the basic correction, by the way. We also have our tone. So this is our exposure. Does it need to be darker or lighter? Do we need more contrast or less contrast? I'm going to add just a little less. We'll do a slightly different correction on her this time. Do you need more in your highlights or your shadows? Does your white balance itself need to go up? Does your black balance itself need to go up or down? And then do you want to add any saturation to your image? There are multiple places in Lumetri Color for saturation, and they all stack. So be very gentle with your saturation. So I'm going to up it just a little. I'm not going to take it up too terribly far. So that is the basic correction. I specifically ignored this input LUT. This is filters. You can browse for it, create custom ones. We're not going to look at those here. We're going to look at those later. So I'm going to minimize this basic correction and go to creative. The creative is all of your color correction. How is it working with your saturation, your vibrancy? Do you need to sharpen it a little bit? That sort of thing. So you see we have this look here. This is more of that filter system here. So the difference between the LUT and the look is more of a filter. However, you can also be like, hey, I know that I really want my footage to look like it was shot on 35mm film. There is a look that'll make it look like it was shot on 35mm film without you having to do anything. It'll just do it. It's a filter. We'll look at that later. But they're pretty cool. So if you're like, I want this, bleach LDR, it'll automatically change my color correction to this bleach NDR. And then I can be like, I really don't want that much intensity. I just want a little bit of it. We can change that. If we're like, no, I want this gold rush right here, and I want all of it. We can do that. But I'm just going to put this on none. Go back in the middle. Faded film makes it look as though it's a little bit more faded. So you can see it kind of makes it a little bit more faded, as though it's more or have been printed on film. Do you need to sharpen it? So if you have any softer edges, you can sharpen it. So you can see it gets really sharp. It has a lot of contrast to the small detail locations. So I might need a little bit of sharpening here. Your vibrancy, remember that's your more natural like color. The more I lift this, the more color is added. Remember, it stacks on top of this other saturation as well. So I'm not going to add too much vibrancy. And then there's another saturation here, which again stacks on top of both of those. So we can add a little bit more or remove a little if we need to. I might remove a little bit. And then we have a saturation for the tint of your highlights and your shadows. So if you're like, I want my shadows to be this like weird green color, all the shadows will be green. If you want all your highlights to be red, all your highlights will be that pinkish color. I would use these quite sparingly. But you can see I just clicked inside the center and I'm now moving inside this spiral. I'm actually going to put it a little kind of close to that magenta-y side for the shadows. I'm going to put it a little closer to the red side for the highlights. And then you can change the tint. down through here. So that is the creative side of Lumetri. There are more. So there's the curves. These are all your curves that you could ever want and more. There are some in here that I've never used because I've never needed to use them. Some that I have used, and that's the only tool I've ever needed to use. So definitely make sure in here you're playing around with it. So we do have our standard RGB, our red, our green, and our blue channel. So I'm going to take that green channel down a little bit, just like we did with the other one. I'm going to take that blue up a little bit, take that red up a little bit, change some of these greens here. And then overall take my white up and down a little. Now we also have this hue and saturation curve. So I can take this, put it wherever I want. The lower you go, the less color. The higher you go, the more color. More toward the right you go, is one color, other is the other. So you can see it slightly changes through in here. So if I really like right here, I can do that. I can click it again, change it. You've got hue versus hue. Remember, there were multiple saturations. So this is where is the hue itself. So if I want it to be a little bit more natural, I can put it somewhere else. Your hue versus your luma, that is your overall color and light. So do you need more light, less light, more light, less light? Your luma versus your saturation, how saturated is it versus how bright is it? We want to find a nice, good centerpiece. And then your saturation versus your saturation. Do you want it to be more saturated or less saturated? Lots of different buttons in here that you can play with. Next is we have our color wheels and color matching. This is more wheels, more color. There's also a face detection. You can toggle this off and on. Pretty much it'll just use some different math for in here. So you can change your overall color of your midtones. If I make them a little bit more blue, my shadow's a little bit more green, my highlight's a little bit more yellow. We get a different look here. You can see when I turn this off and on, it does a little bit of subtlety around for paint. And then we have our HLS secondary. This is more color correction, more hue, lightness, saturation. So I can still come in here and change our color with these sliders, change our saturation with these sliders, lightness with the sec in here. You can also add a little bit of denoiser. So if you've noticed you've got a little too much noise in here, you can add some denoise. You can add a little bit of blur to kind of work that out. And then again, there's more temperature correction, more tint correction, more contrast, sharpening, and more saturation. It's a lot of color saturation in here. And then we have vignettes. So if you wanted to make a white or black vignette around your image, you can. Okay. That's pretty cool, right? With that one tool, we were able to get, I'm gonna put no vignette. With just this one tool, we changed a lot of color correction. So this was this original one we did here. So this is the original correction. This is the original footage. So we did this with the levels, brightness, HLS, and curves. And then we did this with just Lumetri. So depending on what you need to do with your footage, you might need to use one or everything. And I highly recommend Lumetri. It's pretty easy. Everything's all in one. Okay, so let's take a look at some other stuff. I'm going to turn this off. And if I type in here in the effects browser, If you type in the word looks, those of you at home, I think it's plugin, and I don't know if it has a 7-day free trial or not. But just keep in mind it may or may not, and you may or may not be able to use it at home. But you will be able to use it if you come in here to use it. So if I type in looks, you'll see I get all of these different things. These are all different types of cameras, filters in here. But if I go all the way to the bottom, slowly, there's this RG Magic Bullet looks. Magic Bullet is the plugin. It is kind of expensive, so free is best. I don't know how you could ever get it free, but I've never seen it anywhere. But you can use it here in the DMC should you want to. And I'm just going to put this looks just directly onto my MOV. I'm not going to add an adjustment layer for this one. And when you click on your MOV or on your footage, you'll see you get this looks section here. And it says Magic Bullet Looks by Red Giant, look and strength. And then there's this little button called Edit Look. This will open a new window because it'll open the plugin, which is kind of its own software for color correction. Of course, it popped up on the wrong screen. So this is the looks plugin. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here, but we've got our footage here. And if you notice, everywhere I move my mouse, there's this tiny little calculator up here that tells me the actual RGB value of that exact point my cursor's at. That's just neat. I've never had to use that part, but I think it's cool. So if you're like hovering right here and you're like, yeah, that green value is pretty high compared to the others. It's like 0.4 off or 0.04 off the other colors. But this isn't what's important. I just think it's neat. If we click this looks button right here, these are all the different filters inside of this program that you can use to change your footage. So let's say I really wanted, let's find a neat one. Yeah, let's do just 1 in a million here. If I double click on that, it'll add it to my footage. These are all the different things that it has done to this footage to make it look how it does. So right here, this is your input, this is your video. This is its gamma, how much exposure is here. I can up or change the exposure as needed. Same with the saturation, if I need to make it a little bit more or less saturated. I've got a spot, so you can see I've got a dark spot here. I can move this, so it puts in a spot. How far out does it feather? What is it doing? There's another spot here, another spot here. I've got a chromatic aberration. If I click here, all it says is, hey, I've got some red cyan color correction on here. If I change this, take up the magenta and take up the blue, you'll see it gets slightly different. Change orange to blue. That's really nice. Change orange to blue. If your footage is nasty orange because of tungsten light, it's one button. Change orange to blue. There's also a haze on here. So you can see it's got a softness. You can take that down. It's a little less. The reach, a little more or a little less. You'll see it changes what's going on here. How much reflection. So it adds a reflection. Like there's something going on in front of it, like maybe we're behind like a lens flare. Colorista here. This is all the color correction. So if I wanted it to be closer to a different tone, I can do that. You can see changing these around a little. I can change the exposure. I can change the contrast, the saturation, the hue. All of these are just more tools for color correction. Again, more HLS. What colors am I using? It's got a curves in here, and then it's got the output. This is what it would render as. If you were like, I really don't like some of these, you can click on this one, hit delete, and it'll remove it. And if you're like, no, I kind of liked it, you can come over here to tools and you can add your own stuff that you want to see in here based off of what section you're in. So this section here would be in this selective location. So you can see, depending on which one I hover over, depends on which section down here it shows up in. So exposure is in this first section. Contrast is in there. But if I come down here to shadow and highlight, that's further back here, right? So depending on what you're looking for in here will depend on which section it's going into. So if I wanted to add this 2-strip process, you'll see that does that blue and red thing for the 3D. So I can click on this and be like, how much green sensitivity do I want? More or less? Do I want there to be more or less exposure? Do I need a preset or do I want to save it as one? So now I get this kind of red-blue look as though we're going to watch something in 3D. And then when I'm done and I'm like, yep, this is what I want. This is all the color I think I need. You can just click the little checkbox and it puts that look directly on your footage. That's really cool, right? Questions about color correction, Lumetri, or looks? Again, the looks are a plugin, so I don't know if you'll be able to get it at home, but it should have a small trial if you want to give it a shot. Questions? Okay. And just like I said, all of these buttons are all available in After Effects too, down to looks, Lumetri, and all that. So if you do want to do everything in After Effects and not in both Premiere and After Effects, you can pick one or the other. So this is pretty nice. I'm going to come back over here to my project. And I'm going to create a new timeline. So I'm going to go File, New. And instead of making a new project, I'm going to make a new sequence. So I can have more than one sequence inside of a project. When we do this, I may have said it before, you want to make sure you're in this HBV sequence and matching the scale that you put on your camera. So if you're like, I'm shooting at 18 or 1080 by 1920 at 24 frames a second, that's the one you're going to use. If you're shooting at 60 frames a second, that's the one you want to use. 30 frames per second, etc. So we're going to do that 24. And then I'm going to import that stabilized video demo. So it's this guy right here. So let's say you go out into the middle of nowhere and you get your footage and you come back and you're like, oh, no, my footage is a bit shaky. A bit. So I'm going to play this feed through once with some sound. So that's a bit shaky, right? Now, if for some reason you're like, man, I really don't have time to go out and reshoot this. Like, it's due tomorrow. I just got my footage today. Oh no. There's a couple things you can do. I will say, if you ever have the chance to refilm, refilming is easier. Go back outside, film some more. But if it's really not the case, it's due like soon, or the person that's hired you is like, no reshoots. You have to work with what I've given you. There's a couple things you can do. So over here in Effects, I'm going to type in warp. And you'll see there's wave warp, warp stabilizers, uni warp. The one we want is this warp stabilizer. And I'm just going to drag it and drop it onto my clip. And if I go all the way back to the beginning, you'll see it's analyzing in the background. It is looking at your footage to see how it can make your footage look better. So I'm going to switch back to editing just so it's easier for you guys to see and we don't have this big Lumetri thing over on the side. So over here in our effects controls, we can see our warp stabilizer here. It's analyzing each frame. So I'm at 36%, about 40-ish seconds more till it thinks it's done. Sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's wrong. There has been times when it's like, it's going to take 3 hours. And I'm like, cool, bye. And then I come back like 3 hours later and it's still thinking about it. Real shaky. Should have refilmed that one. And then there's other times when it's like, hey, it's going to take 5 minutes. So you're like, cool, I'm going to go and get a coffee for 5 minutes. And then before you even leave, it's like, boom, done. And you're like, well, all right, I guess I got to stay. So just keep an eye on it. Most of the times, if you're doing one individual clip that's not about, that's not longer than like 30 seconds or so, it shouldn't take longer than a minute or two. Then when it's done, it'll stabilize. And what we'll get is a little different. Let's see if it fixed it. So that's better a little bit. It got a little wonky if you watch the statue right here. It sways in the wind like a tree. But that's definitely better than that super shaky motion we had, right? So there's a couple of other things in here that we can do to double check to make sure it's giving us the best math. So it runs math. It does math for you, so you don't have to do calculations. To see if the math that it's using is the best one for your individual clip. Now, depending on the clip, you may have to change some of these, all of these, or none of these. So just be aware. There has been times when I've thrown this on it and it just fixed it and it was magical and I was like, oh, the gods have shone down upon me. And other times I do this and it just makes it worse. So, you know, be aware. So first thing is we have this result right here. Currently it is set to smooth motion. If I set it to no motion, it'll re-stabilize. I've muted the track. So now if we look at it, so far, so good, right? We get this kind of weird bending a little bit, but it definitely looks a bit better. And then toward the end, you're like, ooh, whoa, weird. Maybe not so good. So I'm going to put this back to smooth motion. You can change the smoothness by upping this percentage. The higher it goes, the smoother it gets, but also the weirder it'll start to bend. The lower you go, the less smooth it gets, the more things will start to kind of bounce. So depending on your individual clip, you may have to lower it a little bit or raise it a little bit as needed. There's also method right here. This is the type it's doing. Some of these are really fun. So currently we're in subspace warping, which means it'll do your position, your scale, your rotation, and the perspective all at the same time. Whereas you can just do one, the other, or the other. So let's take a look at some of these to see how they look. So let's work from the bottom up. So let's just take a look at position. So it'll just change the position of your clip. So if I hit play. It's still shaky, but it's not terrible. You can tell it's, you know, handheld. It's shifting a little bit. There's not really too much weirdness or rubber banding. Except the end gets really kind of bouncy. If we do position, scale, and rotation, so far so good. Looking pretty nice. I like to keep track of this statue right here. Ooh, some wiggles in there. But overall, pretty nice for this clip, right? Wasn't really too noticeable, but we're looking for it, so it looks a little nicer. Let's take a look at just perspective. So far, so good. Watch, ooh, stretching, weirdness. but overall not too bad if we weren't looking for it, right? So far, this one and position, scale, rotation are pretty nice for this specific clip. So I'm going to go back just to, I think, Subspace Warp. You can also check this preserve scale. Depending on your footage, you might need to check this off or on. And then we have our borders and framing. Currently, we're set to stabilize, crop, and auto scale. This is where it starts getting kind of fun. If we go to stabilize only, to me, this is like that Bigfoot clip that you see circulating where they stabilized Bigfoot and it's just like spinning around it. This is that same thing. So it looks really nice, right? But those edges. So this is what's happening to our clip with this other one that we're just not seeing. So it's shifting and moving, but it's only fixing the one, it's just stabilizing. So we can stabilize it and crop it. So it just crops it down into one little smaller window instead of, you know, scaling it up like we originally had it. See that stretching right here. And then there's the stabilized, synthesized edges. I'm not going to click this because we have to pre-render it. So if I click this, go back to the beginning, it's thinking. Nothing's going to show up here. It's thinking. What synthesized edges does, it says, hey, this edge has this sort of pixel. Let's expand that a little bit and try to shift things a little bit to make it a little bit more realistic. If I hit play, you can see it starts to do it and then it really slows down in chunks. So if you watch right here on the edge, let's not gonna do it again. Here it is. Come on. You can see it, it's trying to make that edge appear like it's being more natural motion. It's synthesizing your edges. Now, if you wanted to see this through, we could come up here to sequence, hit render into out, let it do its thing. May or may not take anywhere from, you know, a minute to 10 minutes. It's saying 2 minutes. It's going down, then back up, down, then back up, down, then back up. So we're just going to hit cancel. And you kind of get the gist. Now, keep in mind, if you need to use the warp stabilizer, you may or may not have to cut your clip into pieces to get the best look. So for instance, if I know with this stabilize, crop, and auto scale works really well for this piece, up to about here, I can go back a little, cut that. That works pretty well. Come over here to the next piece and be like, no, I remember that over here, this position, scale, and rotation worked really well for right here and not right here. You can put different subspace warps on different parts of your clip to get a better calculation. So keep in mind, if you need to do this, you might have to cut this apart to get different results. Questions about any of this? Awesome. Okay. So your homework if I come over here to the write-up section, there is this exercise 3 5x5. This is your homework. When is it due? I think this date is wrong. Let me look. I want to make sure it looks right, because if it's wrong, I'll fix it. For you guys, it is due not this Wednesday, but the next one, because we don't have class on Monday for reasons. The 17th, yes. I just have the days off. So yes, it'll be due the 17th. I'll get that fixed. Because yeah, it's supposed to be like the 10th. That's wrong. It's supposed to be 17th for this section here. So this will be fixed within like an hour. So be aware. So what I want you to do is take a camera, high quality cell phone. If you can't get a hold of a camera, I would prefer you to manually hold one of these big bad boys right here. But Jesus, my day. I'm gonna break something. I'm gonna put that down.
Ma'am?
Put that over here. That mic is gonna be the death of me. If you can't hold a physical camera and you need to use a cell phone, tell me first. If you are close to here, I prefer it if you go downstairs to the checkout room, bring your ID and just be like, hey, I need to check out a camera, and they'll give you one for a few days and then you can bring it back. If that's not possible, just tell me, we'll talk about it. But so far, everyone that's told me before that they don't have access to one, everything seems to be okay. What I want you to do is take your camera of choice that you need to use and either hold it in your hand or use a tripod. Filming in landscape composition. Don't do this whole like, I'm gonna film like this, like a terrible human. This way, not this way, this way. Okay, Ethan, you're good. I want to see the whole frame. I don't want to just see a sliver of it. I want the whole thing. And you're going to shoot either some static shots or moving shots of somewhere. It could be your house, go outside, it can be campus, it can be downtown, it can be your pets out in the sunshine. I'll show you some examples that are going to be edited together into a sequence with a theme. So you can't just be like, here's a car, here's a baseball, here's, you know, I need to see cohesion. So it'd be like, here's my dog chasing a frisbee, here's my dog laying in the grass, here's my dog eating a bone. Something I can see all together. Now, this is video. I will be checking to see if there's motion. So if you're gonna go outside and stare at trees, make sure it's windy. Otherwise, if it's just dead air and the trees are just not moving, I'm gonna think you took a picture. I need to see some motion in there. I also want you to include natural sound. Even if the sound is disgusting and you hate it, and it just sounds like someone's come up to the mic and they're like that, I don't care. I want to hear it. I want to make sure you've got it in there. Now, that being said, some people in the past have been filming stuff in their car and they're singing along to music and forgot that they had to turn an audio, didn't turn an audio, and I was like, I need to hear it. And they're like, but I'm singing, and I'm like, I don't care. Put it in there. Go outside. The light is nicer out there than it is in here. The sun is the best light bulb you'll ever have. All right, go outside. It's nice, pretty. After you've shot your footage, what I'm looking for are 5 clips that are 5 seconds long. So 5 5-second clips. So 1 5 seconds, 2 5 seconds, 3 5 seconds, 4 5 seconds, 5 5 seconds. With those, don't add any transitions. I want them back to back to back to back to back to back. At the beginning of all those clips, I want 2 seconds of black, 5 seconds of some sort of title. It could just be my dog and your name. I'll take it. And then 1 more second of black. Then your 5 5-second clips. And then 1 second of black at the end. Remember, inside of Premiere here, if you need to create black video, you can right click inside of this area in your project settings. Come over here to new item. There is a black video option. You can make it 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 hours, whatever you like. Please don't turn in a 10-hour black video. It's happened before. I will yell at you about it, and your grade will suffer. Color correct and stabilize your footage if it's needed. Remember, it's always easier to refilm than it is to stabilize. It'll save you hours of your life. I can guarantee it. And then I want you to export that whole thing as an H.264 MP4 format and just turn it in here on D2L. Now, this is the part of the semester I get the most questions about turn-in. If the D2L Dropbox up here is like, hey, it's too big, give it to me as a Google Drive link with permission on. If it comes to the day to turn this in and we watch them all, and I can't download it, I'm gonna be like, well, guess you don't get a grade, sorry, fix it. I can't grade you if I can't see it. You know, give me a Google Drive with permission, please. Questions before I show you examples? Okay. Something some people tend to do that is a no-no is you'll sometimes put 1 second of black between your clips. Do not do this. I want clip, then clip, then clip, then clip, then clip. Not clip, black, clip, black, clip, black, clip, black. Clip, 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 clip. Okay. So let's take a look at some examples. So there's two types of examples that I'm going to show you guys. Some are handheld, where people held them with their hands, and others are tripod. You know, it's on a tripod. So let's see here. So it's handheld, no transitions, no black video between, but there was black video at the beginning, title, small black, 5 clips, 1 black at the end. You can get creative with these too. If you've got an idea, you know, just make sure it's the 5 clips at 5 seconds. All right, so those are some examples of handheld of what people have done. You can definitely do, you know, stuff around your house. You can do your pets, that sort of thing. So one more. All right, now here's some examples of tripod that people have done. Now I will say sometimes this project falls on Halloween in the fall semester, so this is a mask. Well, mask we'll do next class, not this one, but the next one.
May I just say that last frame where she was just in the ground, mood, big mood.
Very. You can definitely have fun with this too, by the way. Now, when you're filming, I love that one. It's one of my favorites. When you're filming, one of the things I highly recommend is you film a little bit over and a little bit under what you want to film. So if I'm filming like, you know, the classroom here, I'd probably start it before I even pick it up, pull it up, record you guys in here, let it sit for a second, pull it down, and then stop it. You'll then want to take off and clip and cut off those extra bits so you only have the 5 seconds. So always record a little bit more than you think you need in the off chance you might need it. Some other examples, which I can guarantee is what that last guy did. Now, just FYI, if you're going to drink alcoholic beverages, please don't show me you doing it on campus. I will have to report you, and that will not be fun. Don't do that. Y'all are adults. Pretend you don't drink on campus. Cannot condone bad things. Bad things are bad. Jared, yes, just let me know first. Okay. Questions? Okay, so that's it. You've still got about 30-ish, 20-ish minutes of class time left. If you've got a question, you can stick around. If not, y'all are more than welcome to head out. Just remember, we do have stuff on campus here for you guys to check out for freezies, just downstairs. Pretty much like where our door is in the building, like our second door, directly below it on the first floor. And if you get lost, surely someone would be nice and be like, yeah, just go down there. All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Well, this is the part where I tell you again.
Yes.
I guess you remember from last time, but
Yes.
I am in Chattanooga, so